Today, we're going to break down one of the most extreme survival stories you will ever hear. It's the incredible and true story of Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571 and the absolutely desperate measures its survivors took to stay alive for 72 days, completely stranded in the heart of the Andes Mountains.
Right, let's just dive straight into this. This quote, it really gets to the heart of the harrowing pact that was made at the absolute edge of human endurance. We're going to explore the catastrophic series of events that forced a group of young survivors to make this unthinkable choice between their morality and their very lives.
So, it all began on October 13th, 1972. A chartered plane is carrying a Uruguayan rugby team, their friends and family. They're on their way to a friendly match in Chile. But what was supposed to be a journey of celebration, well, it would very quickly turn into a textbook case study of navigational failure and the sheer peril of the natural world.
Okay, so on board this military charter, you've got 45 people. Now, the pilot, Julio Cesar Ferradas, he was an experienced Air Force pilot. He'd flown this exact route 29 times successfully. But here's the critical detail. He was training his co-pilot, Dante Hector Lagura, who was actually at the controls. Flying over the Andes in a Fairchild FH-227D, that presented some serious challenges. The plane's operational ceiling was pretty close to the height of the mountain peaks around him, and this route was just notorious for vicious turbulence and weather you couldn't predict. All of that is about to become a critical factor. From an aviation safety perspective, this is where the whole chain of disaster really begins. At 3:21 p.m., everything's fine. The flight reports its position correctly. But just 3 minutes later, completely wrapped in thick clouds, unable to see a thing, the co-pilot makes a fatal error in what's called dead reckoning. He thought a strong tailwind had pushed them way past the mountains, much faster than they actually had. So he reports they're over Curacao and asks for permission to descend. And with no way to visually confirm Santiago's air traffic control, they grant the request. This single miscalculation, a total failure of situational awareness, sent the plane straight down into a mountain peak. The impact was absolutely catastrophic. I mean, the wings and tail were just torn off, and the rest of the fuselage skidded down a glacier at over 350 kilometers an hour. For the people who somehow survived that initial crash, one nightmare was over, and a far more terrifying one was just beginning. In those first few moments, 33 people were still alive, but their situation was beyond desperate. They were stranded at over 11,000 feet, surrounded by the bodies of their friends, dealing with horrific injuries, and they were dressed in light clothing, completely useless for the sub-zero temperatures.
So you really have to understand the psychological shift here. For the first 9 days, they all clung to this belief that rescue was coming any minute. They even saw search planes flying overhead, but their white plane was perfectly camouflaged against the snow. And then, on the 10th day, they get a small radio working, and they hear the news that just shatters their entire world. The official search had been abandoned. Everyone had given them up for dead.
With that last bit of hope just gone, the reality of their situation became terrifyingly clear. Their entire food supply was just a small handful of chocolate bars, some snacks, and a few bottles of wine. It was never gonna last. They were starving.
And look, this wasn't some hypothetical question. This was the stark, brutal reality confronting them. As the days dragged on, their bodies just weakened. They got so desperate they tried eating the leather from the plane seats, but that just made them sick. A choice, a really brutal choice, was looming.
It was an agonizing, just soul-wrenching decision. A lot of the survivors were devoutly Catholic, and they debated it endlessly. But in the end, they rationalized it. They saw it as a form of communion, a way for their dead friends to give them the strength to see their own families again. It was a choice for life, no matter how horrifying it was to make.
I mean, this moment just underlines the relentless cruelty of their situation. Just as they had made their peace with this unthinkable act, nature strikes again. A massive avalanche slams into the fuselage, burying them alive while they slept. 8 more people died. And for 3 days, the survivors were trapped in that dark, cramped space with the newly deceased. Their numbers were now down to just 19. After that avalanche, any idea of just waiting to be rescued was gone. The message was crystal clear. The mountain was actively trying to kill them, and staying put meant certain death. If they were going to be saved, they realized they would have to save themselves.
Now, what's so fascinating here is the shift from just pure desperation to calculated action. As you can see, this wasn't a panicked escape. No, it was a planned expedition. They picked their strongest members, they ingeniously crafted gear from the wreckage of the plane, and they rationed their grim food supply for one final gamble, a trek west toward Chile. The sheer scale of this trek, which was undertaken by Nando Parrado and Roberto Canessa, is just staggering. Over 10 days, with basically no equipment, no real clothing, they climbed nearly 4,600 meters. That's almost the height of the Matterhorn. And they trekked for 60 kilometers through brutal, freezing terrain. This was just an act of pure, desperate endurance, fueled only by the hope of saving their friends back at the plane.
After 10 absolutely brutal days, just as their strength was about to completely give out, they saw it. First, a lizard, then signs of green vegetation, and finally, across a raging river, they saw a man on a horse. They had made it out of the snow. They had found civilization.
The river was way too loud to shout across, so Parado attached this note to a rock and just threw it to the Chilean farmer on the other side. This simple, desperate message, written on a scrap of paper, was the culmination of their entire impossible journey. The farmer read it, he understood, and he rode for help. On December 22nd, 72 days after the crash, helicopters finally descended on the crash site. The 14 survivors who had waited there were rescued. In total, 16 of the original 45 people on board made it home. Their ordeal was finally over.
Ultimately, the story of Flight 571 is this incredibly complex tapestry of catastrophic failure, of unimaginable horror, and a profound human resilience. It really forces us all to ask, what lines might we cross to live? And it stands as one of history's most powerful and unsettling testaments to the will to survive.